Welcome back, friends. If I was to do a top 10 US states with the scariest urban legends, Ohio would definitely be on the list. The video I did on Ohio's urban legends was very popular with you guys, so I went back and found some even creepier ones for a whole new video, and here we are. If you want a part 3, then leave a like and also let me know. If you want something else entirely on the channel, I can do that too. For now though, let's get comfortable. I'm Danny Burke, and this is the top 10 scary Ohio urban legends part 2. Starting off at number 10 now, we have Gore Orphanage. Legend says that in 1903, Mr. and Mrs. Sprunger founded Gore Orphanage in Vermillion, Ohio. Soon there were over 100 boys and girls living there. Then rumors of the orphans' mistreatment began. They say that Mrs. Sprunger would cook cows' heads and lungs and force the children to eat them or starve. Mr. Sprunger would also beat the kids with a leather strap until their bodies were covered in welts and bruises. He would also rent out the children to local farmers as slave labor. The children were only allowed to wash themselves once every 2 weeks and all had to use the same exact dirty bathwater. Their rooms were infested with rats that bit them as they slept. Eventually, the children tried to escape. Sometimes alone or sometimes in groups, they braved the dark and tried to cross the river at night, hoping to find people to look after them in the nearby town. On one cold night in December 1923, Gore Orphanage caught fire. Now to this day, nobody knows how it started. Some say a child knocked over an oil lamp. Others say Mr. Sprunger started the fire because he hated the children and wanted to collect the insurance money. The building burnt to the ground with the children trapped inside. Locals couldn't get close to the inferno to save them and had to listen to their screams as the orphanage was reduced to a charred husk. Over 100 children died that night. Legend says that you can still see their ghosts lurking in the field where the orphanage once stood. Late at night, you can hear the sounds of screaming and pleading for help. Moving on to number 9 now, we have Athens Insane Asylum. Now this building opened its doors in 1874, becoming one of Ohio's largest asylums for the mentally ill. In the beginning, things went well. It offered some of the best care to its patients. As the years went on, the owners realized that they could put some of the patients to work there, specifically on the nearby farm. The greedier they got, the more patients they took on. By the 1950s, it had become a dumping ground for anyone that a family couldn't afford or simply didn't want to look after. At 2,000 patients, it was now 3 times over its capacity, yet the number of staff remained unchanged. Patients were forcibly restrained for days at a time, left in crowded rooms meant for one person, and regularly beaten by staff. In 1993, the hospital finally closed its doors. The remaining buildings were left to Ohio University. In the years after, students would tell tales of strange figures standing in the empty wings in the former hospital. For me though, the creepy part is the report of a stain on the top floor of the building. They say it's of Margaret Skeeling, a patient who went missing in 1979. She was found 42 days later in an abandoned ward. Tests show that she died of heart failure, yet she was found naked next to her clothes folded neatly on the floor. To the horror of those who found her, the body had decomposed so badly that a stain had seeped into the actual concrete. It couldn't be scrubbed away, and they say to this day the stain can still be seen. Next up at number 8 now, we have the Melonheads. These humanoid creatures are said to be found in Lake County, Ohio. Now according to legend, the government ran a number of secret experiments on local children there. A man called Dr. Crow performed the experiments on children in an orphanage. The government hoped that they wouldn't cause as much of a stir that way because nobody would care about the children. Not my words, theirs. Or potentially theirs. The results of the experiment were shocking. The children's hair began to fall out and their bodies mutated, increasing their head to a gigantic size as a result of injecting them with excess fluid. The children feared for their lives. They grouped together and overthrew the twisted doctor, murdering him one night in the orphanage. Then they set fire to the building and fled to the woods to become feral. In the years since, locals have reported seeing fully grown adults with huge heads darting through the trees. While this is already creepy by itself, they also say that the so-called Melonheads are now cannibals, feeding on any person that wanders too close to the woods. Moving on to number 7 now, we have the Reformatory. This is an old prison built in 1896 and designed by Levi T. Schofield. He wanted the place to inspire the inmates to experience a spiritual renewal and give up their harmful lifestyle, repent their wrongdoing. In the end though, it gained a reputation for death, after more than 200 people died there over the years. These days, people say that the building is haunted by the spirits of the dead. One such person is Helen Glatke, the wife of the prison's one-time warden. She was was accidentally shot in the lung when a gun fell off a shelf. Now legend says though that she actually killed herself, and the whole accident story was nothing more than a cover-up. Then there's the rumours of a prisoner setting himself on fire in his cell, an old woman roaming the grounds, and also the hole. The hole was said to be a confinement space in the basement of the prison, designed for 20 people at most. However, guards would cram it full of prisoners just to torture them. The pain and anguish suffered within the walls are said to still remain and be heard on cold, dark nights. Moving on to number 6 now, we have Franklin Castle. This Victorian era building is said to be the most haunted house in Ohio, bar none. It's a bold claim, but the story seems to back it up. It was built in the 1880s by a grocer turned banker called Hans Tiedemann. Despite being rich, his life was struck by a number of tragedies. In that house, his 15-year-old daughter died, so too did his mother and 3 other children who died in infancy. His wife became so overcome with grief that she became despondent. He attempted to distract her by turning the house into a sort of castle. He built elaborate tunnels, prominent gargoyles, and a sprawling network of rooms. He stopped though when his wife also passed away. He sold the property. It changed hands a number of times over the decades, and then in the 1960s, reports of hauntings in the house began to spread. There were strange electrical surges, the sound of babies crying, and a mysterious woman in black who roamed the hallways at night. In 1975, human bones were said to be found in a closet in the house. Now since then, there have been reports of an axe murderer there, a mass shooting of Nazis in the basement, and even the hanging of one of the original daughters of the family. People may dispute some of the stories, but some people who visit agree that a lasting presence can definitely be felt at Old Franklin Castle. Moving on to number 5 now, we have the Loveland Frogmen. This is a really weird one, guys, and I'm saying this as a guy who has done more urban legends videos than he's had hot dinners. Residents of the town of Loveland have been reporting since 1955 that amphibious men live along the river there. The first sighting occurred when a businessman claimed to have witnessed 3 bipedal quasi-reptilian entities congregating by the side of the road. The man pulled his car to the curb and watched the creatures for about 3 minutes. He described them as being 3 to 4 feet tall, covered with leathery skin and having webbed hands and feet. While they had some human-like features, he said that they had distinctly frog-like heads. Just before the creatures left, one of them seemed to wave what the witness described as a wand above its head. Like an actual magical wand. Sparks apparently came out of it. The man left, but over the years many have reported similar experiences, leaving many locals to see the Frogman as just a strange part of reality. Next up at number 4 now, we have the Grassman. You can think of this one as Ohio's version of Bigfoot. It's said to have all the same characteristics, a tall bipedal hominid that skulks around Ohio's deep woods. The Grassman gets its name from apparently building small hut-like structures or nests made out of tall grass. The first sighting occurred in 1978 when some local kids ran into their grandparents' home screaming about a hairy monster they had just seen in the gravel pit outside. When the grandparents went outside to investigate, they saw it too. They said it was covered in dark matted hair, sitting in the pit and fiddling with some trash. They later estimated it to be about 300 pounds. The family fled, but it wasn't the last time that they or many other locals saw them. When people started investigating, they found records from the 1700s of Native Americans in the area who spoke of a race of bipedal ape men. They referred to them as the wild ones of the woods and would often leave food out for them in an effort to keep the peace. Next up at number 3 now, we have the Cincinnati Music Hall. This is a classical music performance hall in Cincinnati, completed in 1878. Before construction was even finished, it was said the location was a place where the dead render the lives of the living a burden to them. How intense does that sound? When a nearby canal was being made, authorities found over 100 human skeletons that had to be removed. They buried them in the ground on which this building now stands on. More remains were placed there in 1838 when a steamboat exploded and flung bodies all over the city. They were also buried in the ground below the music hall. If that wasn't enough to creep you out, it also stands atop of an old orphan asylum and an old Civil War hospital. All of this has resulted in locals claiming it's the most haunted place in town. One night watchman felt the presence of ghosts there. He said, "They never touch me, but I always know when they are around, by an icy chill, a thrill of electricity. They never annoy me now by mere knocking, for I have gotten so used to it. So used to it that sometimes when people have really knocked at the door, I didn't open, because I thought it was only the dead that kept knocking, knocking, knocking." Well, I'm glad he can be so calm with dead people knocking at the door at night. Most of us would just nope right out of there. I know I definitely would. Moving on to number 2 now, guys, we have Lake Hope Furnace. During the Industrial Revolution, this furnace was used to process iron ore gathered from the area's sandstone bedrock. After 20 years, the furnace is shut down, but some say creepy stories still remain. They say that in order to ensure the furnace continued operating at night, watchmen were employed to tend to the furnace fires. On one fateful night, a watchman was walking along the platform with his lantern when he slipped in the darkness and fell into the bubbling ore inside the furnace. He screamed out for help, but was consumed in seconds. Now, legend says that on stormy nights, a ghostly watchman returns to make his rounds. There have been dozens of reports of a dark figure carrying a lantern walking along the top of Lake Hope Furnace. Some even say the figure continues pacing back and forth across the furnace until lightning strikes nearby, causing him to disappear until the next stormy night. And finally now, at the number 1 spot, we have the Wickerham Inn. In the 1790s, a man called Peter Wickerham moved to Adams County, Ohio and opened an inn. It was very popular and saw many coach drivers and locals stopping there to drink, eat and converse. One night though, a driver was bragging to the whole inn about how much money he was carrying. Some men in the corner of the room hatched a plan. As he headed to bed, they jumped him, brutally murdering him on the spot. When he didn't appear for checkout the next morning, an employee was sent to check on him. They returned a moment later, pale as a sheet and visibly shaken. When the others entered the room, they saw a horrible sight. The room was covered in blood, absolutely everywhere. On the floor, the blood had seeped into the floorboards, creating the bloody outline of a headless body. But, perhaps even more shockingly, there was no head. Peter Wickerham feared this would be the end of his business. He ordered everything in the room to be taken out and burnt. He also told them to scrub the floor and remove that bloody outline, but no matter how hard they tried, the outline would not fade. Around that same time, people reported seeing the ghostly outline of a headless man peering out of the upstairs window. A long time passed, and in the 1920s, the inn was renovated. In the basement, the stone floor was removed to install a new heating system. As they pulled up the old flooring, they recoiled in horror at the sight of a complete human skeleton, complete except for the skull. Well, thank you Ohio for some more scary stories. I want to hear everyone from Ohio in the comments section letting me know if you want a part 3. If you're not from Ohio, where are you from? Have I done an Urban Legends video about your home? If I haven't, why not? What's wrong with me? Alright, enough questions for now. Thanks for watching. As always guys, my name is Danny Burke and I will see you all in the next video.